So why don't we welcome her? So Leah Hirschfeld joins us regularly whenever we can have her. And she is from the research arm of the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. Leah, I don't see your, there you are. There you are. So thrilled to have you back on the show. Tell us a little bit about what you do in the research arm and what that is at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders.
Yeah, of course. Thank you guys so much for having me. It's always such a highlight to get to come on. So I am a research coordinator here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. And, oh, I got my name. And what that means is that I get to spend my day trying to figure out the best ways that we can use our resources most thoughtfully for our families, our patients, and honestly, even our insurance companies, because they're a huge part of it as well. And so what that means is that supervisors will come and ask me questions, and I get to send them back research articles, or I might be helping with a research study design, recruiting participants, running them through a study, and then analyzing the data and writing up a manuscript so that that gets out to the public so that all of our hard work doesn't just stay at card. And yeah, it's pretty awesome. And then, of course, monthly I get to come on here. Unless Karen Nolte takes it over, she comes on once every quarter. She's our director of research, so very exciting when you all get her as well. But yeah, that's and it's great fun. It's a cool team to be a part of, and cool family. CARD is a cool family to be a part of, so it's pretty great.
Leah,
well, I love it when you're here because you make sense of things for us. Yeah. And
Julia,
today, wait till you hear.
Hold on, Shannon. I was going to ask Leah, what were you saying, Shannon?
No, you go ahead, Nancy.
Oh, I wanted to know if Leah heard our first story from In the News about eating disorders and autism.
I didn't actually. I caught the tail end and this is the second part and was very touched by the coffee shop. I know when I was a behavior technician, we did that at a high school actually, and it was awesome. But I didn't get to hear the first story. Yeah,
Shannon found a study. It was an actual study that linked anorexia nervosa to young women on the autism spectrum, and they found that there was a much higher percentage, 20 to 30%, in fact, were found to have autism as well as an eating disorder.
So maybe something that we can do some more research on later on and have you talk about that. But today, Nancy, I didn't get a chance to tell you this because I had forgotten what we were talking about today. But this was something that you guys had asked about, that she's going to talk with us today about handwriting and its connection, all the research that's been done about handwriting and autism, because this, for some of us, now I know Wyatt has beautiful handwriting. I am so jealous, Nancy. He has absolutely beautiful handwriting and has since I met him. My child, it's an entirely different story. And it has been a struggle. And, so I'm all ears here, Leah. So
absolutely. Yeah, I'm really excited. And Shannon, I'm glad you plugged that this is a question we got from a family. So we do take requests on the research team. We prefer it, actually. So if there's any questions y'all want answered, we come on once a month, so it might take us a minute to get back to you, but we'd love to hear what you guys want. I think the eating disorders is a very sad topic, but something that needs to be discussed. And I do believe there's a lot of research, or at least some. And I'm certainly happy to dig into that and kind of figure out what that is and talk to Karen more about like clinical interventions and things on that topic. But if there's anyone else that has any other thoughts, any other topics, please send them in. Anyway, so handwriting, super interesting topic. And I will say I was surprised when I got the question, I started researching it. And I know, obviously, right, motor skills is going to be a huge component of handwriting. But then as I was looking more into the research, what was really interesting was just how much goes into handwriting. It is not just motor, right? Like, you also really need to be cognitively aware of what's going on, what your next step's going to be, what if you're going to go up to make that T or over to make that A. And there's a lot. I was just astounded this morning. I was like, it's amazing I can write. So really interesting topic, and there's a lot more there than just motor skills. And it's still really important, right? Like, I know there's a lot more about phones and computers and tablets, and those are awesome, awesome tools. but there's still a lot going on at schools where you need to be able to take notes. You need to be able to answer that, read that question on a test. And I think it can be really frustrating for folks if it takes too long to write, or if a teacher constantly asks them what that word is or marks them wrong because they can't read it, right? So it's a really important topic. It can be super frustrating. And now that I've given that whole spiel about why it's so cool, let me tell you about the research article I'm going to talk about. So this is a study that came out in 2019. It's by Rosenblum and colleagues coming out of Haifa, Israel. And what they looked at was, they were like, that's great. Motor skills are super important to handwriting. We have studies already about that. There's a study by Fuentes, which I'm sure I butchered that name, Fuentes, coming out of the Krager Kennedy Institute. And that came out about a decade ago, 2009. And that showed that motor skills are totally predictive of handwriting. Totally makes sense. But what this Rosenblum study wanted to show was, what else is going on, right? We know, like I just said, handwriting is not just motor. There's all these cognitive functions. Is there something about the cognitive functions as well that is connecting to handwriting that's important? And so what they wanted to look at was really those higher level functions, and so they did. So they took 30 children with autism, and they took 30 children not with autism, and they matched them on age, on school year, on gender, on IQ, and on hand dominance. And that's super important because some people will throw in like, oh, they're a bunch of lefties. I don't know that that's true, that lefties have any bad handwriting, but they made sure hand dominance was everyone was matched. And they also, one of the limitations of the study is that they didn't look at anyone who's nonverbal or anyone who had any other deficits. So everyone was verbal, everyone had basic writing skills, no one had mental or physical impairments that would have also affected handwriting. And the reason for this is that the researchers are really trying to dig just like purely into, you have an autism diagnosis, does that affect your cognitive levels and correlate to handwriting? And just purely that, right? They're not looking at verbal delays or anything like that connection. And so what they did was they had all of the children write a story about other children playing in a yard. And it was a free write, so that, no one was tracing a sentence or anything. And they put a piece of paper on top of a tablet and had a wireless electronic ink pen with a sensitive tip to collect the data. So they wrote on the iPad and all that data got collected onto a laptop. And that information gives you, legibility and how long it was taking to write. And also they were looking at like how long the pen's in the air and all this stuff. There's a lot that goes into handwriting. And then on top of that, they asked parents to fill out a form. These kids are 9 to 12. So they asked parents to fill out a form that looked at cognitive measures for the child. So that's getting into, getting into memory, getting into planning, getting into organization, getting into emotional control, the ability to shift between concepts and activities, which all, as you think about it, really plays a factor in handwriting, right? You have to, okay, I want to do the H next. Like there's a lot going on. And then on top of that as well, so we've got the writing, the measurement of the writing, they've got a measurement of cognitive abilities, and then they also had the children take a test on motor coordination and visual perception. We know motor is going to play a factor, but then also does visual perception have an effect? Is there something going on with the ability to recognize shapes or something like that that might also have an effect? And so now I get to the good part about what they found. So they found that motor deficits does correlate to handwriting deficits. That's kind of expected. One of the interesting things that they found was that visual perception actually was not different between the groups. And they found a huge variance, a really large variance in the ability of the children in visual perception, regardless of their group, indicating that visual perception actually is probably not a concern. And I know actually, Nancy, I think we've talked about Wyatt before being an artist, and you guys even mentioned he has beautiful handwriting. And one of the things the researchers actually mentioned, and I love that I get to say, because I always come on and talk about like deficits and things, which I wish I had a better word for. But one of the things they talk about is that autistic individuals actually may have a superior visual performance skill set. And I know we've come on and talked about artistry and things like that with autistic individuals. So I was really excited that I get to make that plug. And so On top of that, right, so motor is a big factor, visual, probably not as much of a big factor. And now what about those higher cognitive functions, right? So what about memory and things like that and the ability to shift attention? So what was really interesting is they found that the part of memory that deals with manipulating and maintaining information in brief periods of time, that's called working memory. But that memory that you use to really think about the moment, think about like what's going on, what you need to do next, all that stuff. That was a big predictor of handwriting, and only in the autistic group. So they didn't see that part of memory was as much of a factor for our non-autistic group. So super interesting here. We know motor effects are going to be motor problems are going to also affect handwriting, but then on a higher level here, memory also might be playing an effect. And so as a parent, you might be like, we need to focus on motor aspects as well for handwriting. But on top of that, you might be able to also encourage memory, working memory as an option to work on. And one of the other things too that the researchers mentioned is to make sure that the child has enough time during writing tasks. They did find that the autistic group was taking longer during their writing tasks. They have more time with the pen in the air. And that honestly also could be part of memory, right? If they're taking longer to think about, okay, how do I make that H? How do I go up? How do I go down? How do I make that E next? They were writing in Hebrew, but I'm going to say that. And so make sure that your child has enough time when they're doing writing tasks. It's been shown that performance time of written tasks in school also is related to writing quality. So this article didn't talk about like quality of the stories or anything like that. They're just purely talking about handwriting, if it looks different, and things like that. So just make sure, your child has enough time. Motor functions is going to be important, and also potentially memory is going to be important here as well, and kind of looking at handwriting as this whole, all these different things that works. And I'll pause to answer any questions or anything, and then I have one other really cool study to talk about with handwriting, but any questions or anything else?
No, I think I'm good. Nancy, you good?
I was wondering if there's an increased prevalence of low muscle tone with correlated with handwriting and difficulty with handwriting.
I don't think I don't have an answer for that one. They didn't look at it, unfortunately. Okay. Yeah. But it's a good question. It's a great question. I wish they had, but I don't think I didn't see anything on that one.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the other cool thing that I'll mention is this really neat study that I found that just came out last year, 2020. That was by Asgur, which I probably also butchered. No one should let me say last names. But his colleagues used this thing called a cellulo robot. And the reason I didn't launch with this study is because this robot is not in mass production. It's coming out of a research lab. So unfortunately, I don't think parents can buy it or anything. But you can always reach out to the group that's doing the cellulo robots and see if there's something you're interested in. But what they did was they took these robots, which are kind of like a mouse shape. And then they had them programmed to trace a letter, basically. And so the children could watch the letter be traced. Then they could put the hand on the robot and follow it and feel it being traced. Then they could actually move the robot and trace it. And then they also played this really fun game, which sounds fun, called Guess the Letter, where the child would follow or make the letter, and then his peers or her peers would try to guess what the letter is. And this was kind of cool because not only do they make it a game, which is really fun, they also make sure that then the second trial, the child got real-time feedback from their peers to try to make that second attempt even clearer and better so that the children could guess it quicker. So you're not only getting feedback, you're also getting cooperation there. And that study found that the children did gain more knowledge on letters and how to write the letters. Again, this is a robot they're using, so it's not pen and pencil. And it kind of gets away from that potential motor problems that we might see with the letters. And again, it's not in mass production or anything. You can't go out and buy this robot, I don't think. I tried. but it's very, very cool. I want one. They're cool. But it seemed very cool and interesting. And so I thought I'd plug it to parents if this is something that you might be interested in, or if robotics and autism is something that you might be interested in getting your child in. You can look up the Cellulo robot, Cellulo, and it'll take you to the lab page and potentially reach out to a lab manager or something. They might get you into a study. But thought that was pretty cool and interesting, and wanted to plug it if I had a minute.
So we do have a couple of comments and questions from viewers. Somebody who said my son struggles with writing, and I belong to that club too. It's not all of us, but for those of us that it's a problem, it's a big problem, right? Someone else said my daughter hates to write, and our school has assigned a special teacher now who scribes for her. Seems to clear her mind enough to express what she wants the answers to be, which I think is a really important point. That for me, we were on this trajectory where we were working on writing, and writing was being worked on in conjunction with things in school. And we got to the point where it wasn't working. Where we had to take writing out and say, because my son wasn't learning grammar and things like that because he couldn't get the writing on the page and they couldn't read it to say, you need to put the noun here, and we never got to that. So we had to take writing completely out of so many of his lessons and work on it separately, which was, I gotta say, I don't think that the school was really prepared for that. I don't think they had been trained in what, and we still, that's the only issue we have left in school is the handwriting thing. And we removed it. And it, the only accommodation that my son has left is that he gets to use a computer for any task, that he is not expected to handwrite anything. If they hand out a worksheet, he gets to type it on a computer. And he just types, so if it's question number 1, he types 1 and he types the answer for it, not the whole sentence. If he chooses to, he can do the handwriting, but he always has the choice to do the typing. And I really want to say that to parents, because when I think about my son who hated writing, and those of you are like, oh, my child hates to write. And my son has been accepted now to 2 very prestigious college programs for screenwriting and playwriting.
Ooh, congratulations.
This is the kid who had BIPs because he didn't want to write. But when we realized in 5th grade, he wrote a poem and I went, what is this poem? And it was because the teacher had let him type it. And it was the most earth-shattering moment for us. We were like, oh, he has something to say. And the actual, what we think of as writing, which is getting the thoughts on paper, he had that. He still needed being shored up for the grammar, but it was the frustration of writing it that he didn't want to do. Now he can write and he still works on handwriting and it's getting better. But just the other day we saw something that my father had written, and my father had the worst handwriting in the world. And my father was very successul. So it doesn't, look at all the doctors that have terrible handwriting, that you can't even read the prescription, help us all. I just want to say, for some of you who are writing in and saying that your child hates writing, make sure that you are noticing, is it the skill of handwriting or the process of writing, and don't assume that they're the same. But there is somebody who's writing and saying, how do you get them to actually work on the writing? Because the child doesn't want to write. He can read since he was 3. He's 5 right now, does not want to write, starts screaming if you ask him to write. And I know that you weren't asked to do any studies on that, Leah, but is there anything you want? Because I have some suggestions about that, but do you have something too?
I mean, my first thought is if you can try to make it a game, just like that guess the letter, right? If you just try to guess the letter and the whole family's around and you're like, okay, we're just going to try to guess the letter, that making it a game might make it fun there. But Shannon, I feel like you might even have much more.
So here's the funny thing. Years before I had a child, I used to be a teacher. And a lot of times I worked with kids who were dyslexic. And we didn't have the little colored sheets of paper back then. So what we did was we had little tiny sandboxes, and we went to carpet stores and got swatches, the little samples of carpet that you bring home, because and we wanted things that were rough, just like the sand is rough. And so instead of starting with the tripod grasp, because the tripod grasp, you have to have the pincer grasp first, and you have to have the core muscles to sit up and have this whole arm working to do that. And a lot of our kids and the hand-eye coordination, as Leah was saying, it's too much. So we would start with something that was gratifying for them, which is the touch of the sand or the touch of the carpet, or in some kids, we made chocolate pudding and put it on paper, and they could draw in the pudding. And we had them take one finger and start to draw shapes and have them draw straight lines and squiggles. And with the pudding, if they're not allergic to it, then they can, and that was reinforcing. But the sand for some of the kids made all the difference in the world, because it paired a sensation with what they were doing. So we could teach them how to do the letters and how to have them face in the right direction. We did that with Jem, and that helped. Eventually, then we went back to working on the pincer grasp. So we would take raisins, which he liked, and we'd put them on a tray. And with raisins, in order to pick them up, you have to use the pincer grasp, right? And then eventually we would get to the tripod grasp by taking crayons, regular, not the big fat crayons, because if you have the big fat crayons, kids draw with them like this. This is not the tripod grasp. So we would take regular crayons and snap them in half and take the paper off of them. So they're short little crayons. And the only way you can draw with them is to take the pincer grasp. We always had short little golf pencils for him to write with. And then the other thing that we got were wiki sticks. They're like wax covered string. And it's called literally wiki, W-I-K-I sticks, S-T-I-X. Whenever we go to an event, we usually give them away. But you can shape wiki sticks into anything. So our therapists would shape wiki sticks into a J. And so the inside of it, it's like a J. So the inside of it, they put it on a piece of paper. And all my son had to do was stick the pencil, the little golf pencil, in the groove, and he couldn't fail. And then they would pull the wiki stick off, and he would look, and they would show him that he had drawn his name, and they would reinforce him for it. And because he couldn't fail, he was willing to do it. It's exhausting. You can also get stencils to begin with, but giving them success, because why would they want to do it unless they have some measure of success? So there's a wonderful handwriting program that most teachers and schools do now that's called Handwriting Without Tears. And I would also tell you to go on Pinterest and put in fun handwriting activities, because that old thing of just sitting and doing shapes over and over and over again, our kids don't like it. And if they're not successful at it and there's no reward for doing it, why would anyone want to do it? I love lettering, because like, to me, it's like a form of art. It's reinforcing to me, but if it's not to your kiddo, you want to be really careful about that, because it becomes, as you said, aversive. And when it's aversive, you're going to have to start way back at the beginning, work on early skills, and reinforce the hey nani nani out of that thing. But that's just the technical term for it, the hey nani nani thing. There's another question here. In the study, how did the child hold the pencil? In order to write, she has to use the tripod grasp. What, on your study, what did they use?
They didn't specify, I don't think, but my guess is, I mean, these are all Israel, so they said third year of school, so I'm going to say they're third graders. But they're all third year students, 9 to 12. Verbal, already had writing skills, so my guess is they're probably using the tripod. They're probably using the tripod grasp there. Would be my guess, but I don't think they specified it.
And Lucy says, I have my son's OT working on it, which is absolutely, those are the people who should be working on handwriting. And you just reminded me that the other way to get kids to develop the tripod grasp is this has to be very supervised, especially if it's a kiddo who puts things in their mouth, but you have them lay on their tummies on carpet. So you can use that carpet swath again. You take pictures from coloring books, cut them out of the coloring book. So it's one piece of paper laying on the carpet with them on their belly. You give them one push pin, and they have to stick the pin in the black line around the outline. And when they're done, they get to tape it to the window, and the window shines through in the design. So that's the reinforcer. But what that does is the only way to hold the push pin to do it is with the tripod grasp, but it also helps kids who don't have the core skills, because they have to hold themselves up with one arm, and their belly helps to hold them up, but it helps to work their upper torso and they love it. But you have to do it on carpet. Otherwise, it'll be a singular act of frustration. But they used to do that all the time. Somebody else says, my daughter uses twist and write pencils. I don't know the twist and write pencil.
I don't know what that is.
I don't know what that is either. So we're all going to have to Google that. But there's all kinds of fun things too that you can add, that like there are pencils in different shapes. There are pencil grip things. There are toppers to put on the pencils that jingle or don't jingle, or have feathers or don't have feathers, and have fans or don't have fans. Like there's all kinds of ways to make that stuff reinforcing. We had to get the SpongeBob SquarePants pencils, right? And then we had to get the electric pencil sharpener, because he loved to put the SpongeBob SquarePants into the electric pencil sharpener. You make it like as fun as you possibly can. And Mary says you can get the twist and write pencils on Amazon. So everybody that's interested can check that out. But I think it's so fascinating. I know when my son started high school, one of the, as I said, we had it written into his, now it's 504, but at the time IEP, that he could use a computer. First day of high school, we get the message from the new social studies teacher, who says to parents, by the way, you're all, I know at my son's school, every kid gets a computer to do all their work on. So I was like, this is great. We're not going to have a problem with the handwriting thing. And then the first day that comes home the note saying all students will be required to take their Cornell notes by hand. Mm. And this very diligent teacher sends home, you would love this, Leah, she sends home a study with the syllabus saying why you have to take your notes by hand. And this poor woman didn't know who she was dealing with as mom. So I sent back, I said, oh, that's lovely, but here's my study that shows that kids with autism, their pen is off the paper longer, so they miss things and their notes are not effective because of it. So where shall we meet in the middle? And she was a great teacher and read the study, because, a lot of teachers would be like, thanks, and not read it. But she read the study and she was like, okay, I don't know what to do now. And we compromised. I read her study and went, I hadn't thought about that. So we agreed that he would take his notes with his own handwriting, so that he would have the cognitive connection that she wanted, but that he would not study from his notes. She would give him a copy of the typed notes from which to study.
That's so he lovely compromise,
right? So he didn't get left out of taking, good notes. He had the practice of taking the Cornell notes, had that connection, and she was like, "Oh, that'll work for you." And I was like, "Yeah, that'll work for me. That works for you," and it was great. And he was successful in the class. So I do encourage parents. It's like, talk it out, be a team. If you have an OT working on the team, they are really the person who has the lion's share of the responsibility for any goals that are on your child's IEP for handwriting. Sometimes, like Nancy, I know you have known some really great OTs over the years. Mm-hmm. One in particular that you had that was just, sometimes you get the right OT and they are brilliant. They're problem solvers. They're wonderful. And then sometimes you have OTs that aren't worth the piece of paper they're printed on.
And I'll throw in this research. Actually, it was coming out of the Department of OT in Haifa. So OTs can be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But I love Pinterest. I don't know if you ladies are on Pinterest. Whenever I need an idea for something, how to teach it to anybody, myself included, I'm on Pinterest. it seems like teachers have really taken to Pinterest, and it's a place where they share information. And sometimes they sell it on Pinterest. Like they'll say, I have this thing that I made and I'll sell it to you for $1.99. I love that stuff. I love supporting a teacher. Yeah, Nancy?
Lucy wrote in and said her OT, I think, and she said, mine seems good. She gave him extended wrist activities.
Oh, there you go. Because maybe that's part of what they're seeing, is that the wrist is something, it's different for everybody, right?
Right.
There's so much that goes into it. Wrist, core, head, all of it. It's basically a full body activity.
She said distal mobility activities.
I don't even know what distal mobility activities is. Thank goodness we have OTs to help us with this kind of stuff. And I do love a good OT, man. I absolutely love a good OT. But a lot of that stuff is on Pinterest, you guys. But if it isn't reinforcing, think about, like, okay, let's just take a brief poll here. So what when you have downtime, what do you like to do, Leah? I'm putting you on the spot. Like what? Yeah.
I will either run or read or watch TV.
Oh, aren't you evolved? Okay.
It's recorded. I have to say these things.
Okay. Nancy, what about you? What do you like to do with your downtime?
With my downtime, I like to be outdoors, go for a hike or a walk. I also like to read, and I like to watch, the streaming, so Netflix series. I'm always discovering new stuff to watch.
I used to love to read, and I come from a long line of families who read. Since COVID, I can't read.
Oh.
I cannot concentrate. I'm having a terrible time reading. I just can't, there's too many things going, and you would think it's like the ideal time to read. I can't read. But I have this stupid app on my phone that is the stupidest thing on the face of the planet. It's pictures, and it's like a paint by number, but you just tap the color and it puts I don't even have to think about what colors should go here. It's not a coloring book where I get to choose. It tells me the color. It says color number 12 goes here, and I have to tap the color 12. It's mindless. It is absolutely mindless, and I do at least a picture a day. Now, there are some people that I know that would be like, that is mindless, and that would make me crazy, and I can't possibly do that. They would say, Shannon, this is stupid. You're wasting your time doing it. But it's calming to me. It's meditative for me. Now, both of you are runners. To me, that is the seventh ring of hell. I will, and I sometimes can run, not far, but I can't get my mind to get into that meditative place to continue to do it for longer than 5 minutes. And my point here is, we all like different things. And if you forced me to be a person who ran every day, I would be an unhappy person. Now, I know that you guys would say that there are things that could be done to help me to enjoy running and to help me to get into that mind space, but I'd have to be willing to do it. And so our assumption that writing should be fun for kids, I think, is outlandish. Mm-hmm. And I would like to, straw pool of people watching, who here likes to do something you're not good at? I don't know anybody.
Yes.
So I think it's important that we make it reinforcing for them if they must do it. Take it away if you're at the point where you can take it away, make it a side thing, but reinforce it when you do it, and try to make it fun. This is my advice. Yeah?
One quick other thing, I know when you were talking about putting something down on the table and then them having brought, I grew up in third grade. We did shaving cream. We did shaving cream.
Great sensory. Yeah.
I loved it. I you could put I still would love someone to put shaving cream. I mean, I guess I could do myself, but totally loved it. Yeah.
There you go. So all these different things that you can do and add that sensory element to it. We're out of time. We went past time because I was too verbose. But Leah, thank you so much. I think that next month we're having Karen, so we'll see you again in April. Is that accurate?
Yep, that's exactly right.
April, Autism Awareness Month. So we'll look forward to what you bring in that month.
Oh, there's a lot of pressure. That's too much pressure. Anyway, thank you guys so
Thank
much for having
you.
me. It's always a pleasure.
Thank
Okay,
you so
bye-bye.
much. Thanks for watching Autism Live. If you found anything helpful in this video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram for important updates. And please download our free podcast wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now. To subscribe, click here. And if you'd like to check out some more of our videos, click here.